If you're looking to create, grow, and sustain your wealth, download and subscribe to the Pain Points of Wealth podcast at BeBullish.com with Bob, Ryan, and Chris Payne. It's your podcast for market insights, money tips, and real talk on the economy. Download and subscribe at BeBullish.com. The Dr. Sky Experience on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
And at 5 minutes after the hour, ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again to another exciting adventure in Theater of the Mind radio, of course, as we continue with the Dr. Sky Experience. As we move deeper into your month, into the darkness of night, we bring you, in our opinion, some of the best guests that we can talk with about the many mysteries of the universe. Things that we don't understand that are not normally part of our daily routine. And ladies and gentlemen, as your humble host, Steve Cates, Dr. Sky, we welcome you as part of our conversation. As mentioned many times before, we think of four types of conversation. They are debate, discourse, dialogue, and diatribe. We like dialogue, and we prefer it, if we can have it, in the realm of critical thinking. To get in touch with our many guests, and of course, your commentary, in the form of dialogue, is 1-800-848-9222. That's 1-800-848-9222. You can email me, just DRSKY, at WABCRadio.com. And this show talks with you, not at you, about the great subjects, the mysteries of astronomy, space, aviation, weather, celebrity guests in the mix, and you bet, stories of American exceptionalism. We love critical thinking on this radio show, as I'm sure many of you do. And would like to appeal to many first-time callers out there, listening maybe to this particular radio station and this format for the first time, as well as all of our regular callers. I'd be remiss if I didn't thank our helmsman as we consider this to be a magical starship through the power of radio. That's right, 77 WABC. Beaming out across the nation, around the world, and I'm even confident, out into the universe. Great information, as we said before, in your opinion. We continue to discuss for the next 2 hours the whole subject and updates on the story of ufology. What's going on, of course, in the world of UFOs, UAPs, and many of the other things that are unexplained. And to our audience, we bring the best guest. In just a moment, we'll introduce Dr. Kevin Randle. He and I, for the longest time, have been part of Coast to Coast AM. You know the show with George Norrie, and of course, the predecessor to that, the originator, Art Bell. He and myself, well, I think he's got more time than I do, but who's counting? Some 25 years for myself as being the correspondent talking about these wonderful things in the heavens. A brief bio of our special guest, Dr. Kevin Randle, is as such. An American ufologist, science fiction, and historical fiction writer, a military veteran. Within the UFO community, he is often regarded as one of the preeminent experts on the reported crash of a UFO near Roswell, New Mexico in July 1947. A writer with more than 80 books to his credit, Randle is perhaps best known for his books about UFOs and the Roswell story. While the vast majority of his books are science fiction and historical fiction, we find itself that many of these books are talking about the Roswell story. In New Mexico in 1947, that exerted an enormous influence on those interested in the saga. Randle, along with the departed Stanton Friedman, generally acknowledged are one of the leading researchers into the UFO story and the UFO question. He continues to work in the UFO field, although lately he has concentrated more on his science fiction books than UFO research. And now we welcome Dr. Kevin Randle. Dr. Randle, thanks so much for spending time with us on these subjects. Good morning.
Are we done yet?
Oh, absolutely, my friend. Hey, we could go on longer.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I forgot to mention, of course, your military service. You obviously have a lot of experience in the UH-1 Huey helicopter, which, of course, you know better than I do. The reason it's called Huey, it was originally designated as the HU-1, and it came out to be a Huey. So there we go. Interesting information about you, our special guest. But let's cut right to it, because so many people out there, I know in the news, there's so much, Doctor, that we could talk about. But let's begin with what's happening in the world right now. We're hearing so many stories, more like on the front page of a newspaper in the digital world, about things that people are seeing out there. Talk about this. I mean, it's really confusing to many people. We hear UAPs, UFOs. Give us an update about the number of different sightings and the interest the public has in this subject.
one thing we've got to understand is most of the sightings that are reported are probably mundane objects seen under unusual circumstances, so people misidentify them. I think almost everybody in the UFO field agrees that 95 or 96, 97% of the sightings are mundane objects, but that leaves a solid core of very good sightings. And I always try to look for sightings that last more than a minute, making sure that the witnesses have a good opportunity to observe what they're looking at, and we get a better idea of what they've seen. So the longer that's in sight, if it's a real UFO, the more confusing it becomes for people. But when we look at the situation today, as we're moving into the government now wanting to explore this a little bit more, this is something we've gone through in the UFO field in the past, and it's always ended up with nothing new being found. I think of this as kind of, I call it Twining 2.0, because Nathan Twining was the general in charge in 1947 when they set up the first of the official UFO investigations, and we're moving back into that. But what we're seeing today is the same things we saw back then. 1966, 1967, the Air Force paid the University of Colorado, I think it ended up as $550,000 to investigate UFOs, the scientific investigation of UFOs. And what happened was we had an exchange between Lieutenant Colonel Robert Hippler and Dr. Robert Lowe of the committee, exchanging what they're going to find before they even start the investigation. Hippler said, well, we would like you to find that the Air Force had done a good job of investigating it. There's nothing to UFOs, and we need to close the investigation. And 18 months later, that's exactly the conclusions they came to. So for a long time, it was, well, we've investigated scientifically. There's nothing to it. Why follow on? The Air Force closed Project Blue Book. Here we now are in 2025, and we're now going through this again. They're setting up investigations. They're making the same kind of conclusions that they had drawn before, and we're really not progressing very much. I had hoped that we would be moving closer to disclosure, but in today's environment, I don't think we're making any real progress.
Well, let's continue with the word disclosure. This is interesting. I mean, both of us have been involved in this. You're an author. I mean, we share the same kind of a flat platform in the past. You presently, of course, as I mentioned, proudly 25 years with Coast to Coast, starting with Art and now, of course, with George. But this whole thing about disclosure, I mean, so many people out there are kind of, fed up with the fact that we don't hear the truth about this. And I'm trying to give some hope to this whole situation. I mean, what do you think really needs to be done? And we're hearing congressional hearings, we're hearing all these things, and other people who tell us they know more, like the David Crushes that go into skiffs. They know so much about this. So give us some hope that maybe one day we'll hear the real story. Yes, we have recovered craft. We have alien bodies. Go ahead.
No, I don't think there's much hope of the government announcing that sort of thing.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't want to be naive, but I got to ask anyway. Go ahead.
Well, I had hoped back in 2017 when all of this began to break that we were moving closer to disclosure, admissions of what has been recovered, and we just aren't getting there. I mean, here we are now, 8 years down the road. We've had new investigations commissioned. What have they come up with? The same stuff they came up with for the last 75 years, not looking at the totality of the evidence that's available to us. I mean, there's some very good sightings where there is no terrestrial explanation for it, and we can see how the cover-up has progressed. It's Little Everland sightings in November of 1957. UFO seen by literally hundreds of people, got close to the ground, stalled cars.
Wow.
Left landing traces. It's interacting with the environment. And the investigation boiled down to the NICAP, which is the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena, a civilian organization headed up by Don Kehoe, and the Air Force saying, well, there were only 3 witnesses, and Kehoe saying there were 9. I went through the Project Blue Book files and counted 13. But when you look at the newspaper clippings and all of that, you find literally dozens of witnesses. They had a very good opportunity to explore this, and the Kehoe and the Air Force ended up arguing over the number of witnesses, which diverted the conversation.
Yes,
I found evidence that the Air Force was following the sheriff, Hockley County Sheriff, and I always hated his name, Weir Clem, out to look for the UFO. Right. They got close to it, and the sheriff's car was stalled. A Texas Department of Public Safety car behind him was stalled, and a car with Air Force officers behind them was stalled. And we hear absolutely nothing about all of that. The Air Force said, well, the sheriff only saw a streak of light in the distance, but there was newspaper clippings that came out before the official
Way more to it, right? Way more to it. Dr. Kevin Randle is our guest, ladies and gentlemen, here on the Dr. Sky Experience, and we, of course, welcome your conversational points here in the form of dialogue. 1-800-848-9222. That number once again, 1-800-848-9222. Let's hit the magical afterburner button on this, especially to our New York and tri-state area listeners, and of course everybody around the country. Give us your synopsis, Dr. Randle, about the whole sightings that were going on about a year ago in the whole metropolitan area of New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. In your opinion, what the heck was that, and what can you tell us about that?
I can't tell you much about it, about what it was or anything like that. I mean, we've had those sorts of sightings many, many times. The Washington Nationals in 1952, sighting seen over Washington, D.C., tracked on radar, intercepted by jet fighters, seen by pilots, seen by people on the ground, and, I mean, credible people. We move forward into today's arena, we get the same sort of thing, and yet we don't get the kind of investigation you want. The witnesses are kind of suppressed. They're kind of humiliated. They're kind of suggested that maybe they weren't completely sober when they saw these sort of things.
Yeah, discrediting people, right. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's been the ploy since basically 1953 when the CIA sponsored the Robertson panel, which was 5 days of scientists looking at the best evidence from Blue Book and determined that there was nothing to it. And what we should do is take the mystery out of UFOs, make sure that people don't have an opportunity to report what they want. There was an idea that teachers shouldn't allow students to report on books on UFOs, anything like that. To kind of get Disney to make some anti-UFO films and that sort of thing. We move in today's environment. That's the same thing that we have going on today.
Absolutely. You say it so well. No, it's very interesting, Doctor, and it's so fascinating to have you here because for years I've been listening to you and many people out there, and not only that, of course, the books that you have. Tell us a little bit more about your website or your podcast so people can follow through this. Sometimes we forget in all the busy callers that we get. Of course, we love them dearly. How do people get in touch with you throughout this, or after we conclude this interview in about 2 hours?
Well, the blog is www.kevinrandle.blogspot.com, and of course they can append comments to the various postings. And sometimes I get personal messages that way as well. I don't post those to the blog, but I respond to those comments when I have the opportunity to do so.
Yes.
The podcast you can listen to all 200 and some interviews that I had conducted over the years with people by going to the blog, and there's a icon on the left side. You can click on it and you can see all the interviews that I've done. For example, I talked to Calvin Parker, who was involved in the Pascagoula abduction.
Wow.
I talked to...
We're going to get into that one later, too, in some graphic detail, because that's fascinating. But please continue. I mean, you're just a wealth of information on this whole story of ufology.
You know, and I on there I've got Colonel Charles Halt, John Burroughs, and Jim Pedeston, who were involved in the Bentwaters case in 1980, and I've interviewed all of them, and you can listen to the interviews there. I would say about Calvin Parker, I was always of the opinion that these abductions aren't really taking place, and there's not good evidence. And I had Parker on the radio show, and he said, well, there were people who saw the abduction take place, and I thought they'd all come out of the closet late in the game, 20 years, 30 years later. But he said, no, there were people the next day, and going through the documentation with the Pascagoula case, there's a letter that was created by the Air Force. Hickson and Parker went to the Keesler Air Force Base to make sure there was no kind of radioactivity around them, and they were interrogated about that. And in this letter, it mentions 4 people who were interviewed the next day after the abduction, talking about having seen parts of it. And since
That's
that time, a lot more information has come out about that. So it's one of the few abduction cases we can look at where there's independent corroboration of something strange going on in the area.
Absolutely. In our time machine, ladies and gentlemen, we'll go back as Dr. Randall is talking about, just giving us the quick skinny on it, but we'll talk about it in detail. October the 11th in our time machine, 1973, Pascagoula, Mississippi. Something very, very strange indeed. You have so much research on that. But if I may, before we go to the heartbreak in a while, I just wanted to kind of move back in time. UFO sightings over the United States, you can look in all different chronicles and see way back in the 1800s, sightings all over the place. These large airships supposedly seen over Texas in 1897. So this is not just a new phenomenon, and then let's not discount, of course you're not and we're not, all the sightings throughout not only biblical history in their interpretation of the Bible or scripture, these wheels that were spinning in the sky, Jacob's ladder, all kinds of things. I mean, I have to ask you this on a personal note. Your interest in this, how did you get started in this? Because you're a military man. One day you woke up and then carried the story on here for us about how you, Dr. Randall, got interested in the story of ufology.
Well, we have to go beyond even when I was in the military. When I was a little kid, my mother took me to see the movie Earth versus the Flying Saucers. And
I love that movie.
That kind of sparked my interest in it. I remember sitting in study hall in high school reading Brad Steiger's Strangers from the Sky. And Brad Steiger and I became good friends later on, which is kind of an interesting story. He was helping me out. We used to argue who'd written the most UFO books. I thought it was him. He thought it was me. It turns out it was me. A lot of his books dealt with paranormal activities as well as UFOs, flying saucers. I've just done mostly flying saucer UFO type books. So, but between the two of us, we've written quite a few of them. I think Nick Redfern's trying to catch up with us, or was trying at one time to catch up with us on that. But my interest was sparked by that film and reading Brad's book. One of my friends in high school said his mother had seen a UFO, and I'd always heard about how, they're just indistinguishable fuzzy blobs of light in the distance. So I talked to his mother about it, and my one question I wanted answered was, did you get a look at it? Was it distinct? And she said yes. It was clearly saucer-shaped, very well-defined edges, so it kind of ruined the idea of the fuzzy blobs in the distance.
Well, we rarely give homework on the Dr. Sky Experience, Dr. Randall, but I'm going to mention again the movie, of course, Earth versus the Flying Saucers. If, ladies and gentlemen, you haven't seen it, don't do the colorized version, of course not. We're going to recommend the original black and white. And yes, that movie is very interesting because of the special effects, the flying saucer or UFO that's depicted there, the attack on Washington, D.C., and the voice that says something really strange. It kind of scared me. It's like, and I don't do voices, but it was like, this is a voice speaking to you from thousands of miles from your planet. But I mean, isn't that like bizarre? But yet it also has some science fact to it too. It's not just, illusory crazy stuff. It has some, I don't know, that got you started and it bothered me just like Invaders from Mars did. That scared me more.
Well, the interesting thing was it was allegedly based on Don Kehoe's book, Flying Saucers from Outer Space, I think. And he was very, very upset by it because there was very little about the true sightings. It was, the fictional account of the aliens invading Earth and going to take over, that sort of thing, and how we were able to defeat them. But and you're right, the spooky voice from outer space. And
I couldn't do the voice, but I tried. Right.
And the Robert and their Harry, the special effects done by Harry Harryhausen was spectacular as well.
That is for the time period, and that's what I believe it's 1956. Am I right?
I think that's exactly right.
But as old as I am, my friend, and many of those listeners out there should see it. Homework that we rarely give on the Dr. Sky Experience, and then people can report back to us and say they can be their own movie critic, right, Doctor? That'd be good.
There was another movie that came out, I think, in 1954 called UFO. And the gag on that one is a lot of the witnesses that had been reporting these things were interviewed during in the movie. Robert Newhouse, who shot the UFOs over Trenton, Utah in 1952. He was interviewed about what he had seen and what he had done. Nick Mariana, who shot the UFOs flying over Great Falls, Montana in 1950, they were interviewed. And so there was a lot of the people who were involved in the early sightings were interviewed in that movie. And it was the first time that those movies were released into the public arena. All they really show is blobs of light, but we've since, in the investigations, Barry Greenwood, for example, did an analysis of the length of the movie, the Great Falls movie, and discovered that the Air Force had removed quite a bit of the early parts of it, which, according to Mariana, showed the disc-shaped objects, and it was later on in the film that you just saw them as blobs of light moving across the sky. But
Amazing.
we were able to establish that the movie had been altered while it was in Air Force custody, you might say. So that movie, UFO, I mean, that's an interesting movie. You get a chance to see that. That'll give you kind of a better perspective. Earth versus Flying Saucers, of course, is science fiction as opposed to reality. But
it sure
UFO is more nonfiction.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're privileged and honored to have Dr. Kevin Randle with us for this entire iteration and experience of the Dr. Sky Experience here. Your questions and comments are welcome, always. And we're looking for new callers, too. In addition to the great callers that we regularly get, please continue, of course, at 1-800-848-9222. That's 1-800-848-9222. And just in case you're curious, ladies and gentlemen, the 922 stands for what? WABC. Dr. Randle, when we come back here in just a few moments before the break, obviously after the break, I wanted to get into your deep discussion, a deep dive into this whole subject of Roswell. I mean, this is an area that you, along with Dr. Stanton Friedman, I knew him very well, and of course you knew him way better. The whole conversation there of what happened. But in a couple of minutes before we go to the heartbreak, just to outline this. July 16, 1945, we see the Trinity test, the nuclear explosion, or whatever they decided to do with the gadget there. It went off. Dr. Tombaugh, who was a professor that I had at New Mexico State, said he saw the flash. Is it true that after that time period there were sightings which led up to Roswell, or is that just another fictional hoax that many people have perpetrated? Tell me about that.
Well, there didn't seem to be a sudden spurge of sightings in 1945. It really started in actually during World War II, if you want to go back far enough, because we had the Foo Fighters that both Allied pilots, Allied air crews, and the Axis power air crews were reporting these strange things following the airplanes. Mostly they were talking about blobs of light seen in the distance, but sometimes there were solid objects. And of course, because they're engaged in conflict, they would fire on these things. Sometimes they said the bullets would enter these blobs of light and not come out the other side. Sometimes they would see them bounce off the solid objects. It was very, very critical that they find out what these were, because they thought they were secret weapons by the Axis powers. Of course, the Axis powers thought they were secret weapons by the Allies.
Everybody
when the war
thought they were theirs, right?
Yeah, when the war ended, the priority evaporated. Nobody cared anymore what it was. Then we had the Ghost rockets in Sweden or Scandinavia in 1946, and then we get to 1947 when we have Kenneth Arnold's sighting, and that kind of sparked the whole interest in UFOs here in the United States. Although there had been sightings before that, there was an unofficial investigation created at Wright-Patterson Air Force by Wright Field in 1946 under the direction of Nathan Twining to look into these things without making a big splash. And then, of course, once the Kenneth Arnold sighting was made, then the investigation became more official. And it eventually evolved into Project Sign, which was the investigation that led to Project Grudge and finally Project Blue Book that lasted for some 22 years.
Yeah, this is an amazing story to have Dr. Kevin Randle with us, ladies and gentlemen. The Dr. Sky Experience continues. What we're going to get into in the next half hour, in the next remaining portion of the radio show, we're going to be continuing to talk about Roswell, his experiences, his research, just in his opinion, what really happened there. Among all the stories that you've heard, I've spoken there, Doctor. I know you heard me talk about that privately, and I was treated with a little bit of, I hate the word disrespect. I was giving a story or a presentation on how to be a better sky watcher by showing people how to identify known objects in the heavens. And then I had a large group come up to me and say, no, you're not a believer. And I said, well, what do you mean not a believer? I said, I'm trying to help you navigate the highway to the heavens so the things that are in the heavens we can identify on the star map versus, like you and I were talking about before, many are misidentifications of objects that are maybe identifiable. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we continue on the other side of the hard break. Dr. Kevin D. Randle, he joins us. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, talking about the UFO situation, UAPs, your questions and comments at 1-800-848-9222. We'll be right back and continue.
The Dr. Sky Experience on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Dr. Sky Experience.
Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
I happen to be privileged enough to be in on the fact that we have been visited on this planet, and the UFO phenomenon is real. A quote from former Apollo 14 astronaut and a good friend of ours, and I'm sure that of Dr. Kevin Randle, Edgar Mitchell. 32 minutes after the hour, ladies and gentlemen, 1-800-848-9222. We're discussing with an expert in his field and a popular author, not only on this subject, but also on many science fiction books, too. His name is Dr. Kevin Randle. Doctor, thanks for joining us again. We have callers jumping in here, and of course, that's why we do the show. They rule.
Well, let me interrupt because I want to go back to something you said just before the break about your treatment there in Roswell, trying to explain the mundane.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was investigating a series of UFO sightings in Wisconsin. Mm-hmm. And I was in the sheriff's office at the time a call came in, and this guy said, something's landing in my backyard. And the sheriff's deputy says, you want to go? And I said, of course. So we get to the guy's house, we run through the house, we get into the backyard, and he points to this flashing red light. It's on a radio tower. Been there for years. Right, another guy called, had an observation of the moon and thought it was hovering or flying around his house because of low-hanging clouds blowing by it, and it seemed that it was giving the moon motion. I mean, it's the moon, for crying out loud. And he couldn't.
Well, you're right, Doctor. Right, and I came in peace there. I mean, I wasn't totally destroyed by it, but I was a little bit surprised, that's the good word, that a large bunch of people came up, and a few of them actually had their finger in my chest saying, you're not a believer. And I was like, wow, this is like getting a little bit bizarre. All we're trying to do is educate, like you are, with research, facts, evidence. And I was trying to just say, hey, there's Saturn, there's Jupiter, there's the star Sirius, and then you know your night sky. So here we go. Let's say good morning to Andy in the Bronx. Andy, you're on with Dr. Kevin Randle. How are you doing this morning? Welcome to the show.
Gentlemen, fabulous show. Dr. Sky, Kevin, this audience loves this. Let's turn back the clock to 1972. The National Enquirer offered a $50,000 reward for anybody who could come up with any evidence that there was any aliens visiting the Earth. And then they upped it to $100,000 in 1975. And then we know about the Travis Walton thing. He was actually awarded his crew $50,000. He said he was abducted. Then it was proven to be a total hoax. That's why I'm really surprised. You two guys, articulate, smart, intelligent, worried about us having aliens in Roswell frozen on an ice bed or something. But you're not really worried about America being invaded by the third world. It doesn't bother you. The Democratic Party is now a communist party, and that's a takeover there. You're not worried about what's going on in the big cities with the Communist Party taking over people.
Well, Andy,
the whole city.
Yeah, not to cut you short, you bet. This station 24/7 is concerned about that, and we're trying to add, no apology, just a little bit of discourse on the subject matter. But no, I understand, and let our good guest, Dr. Kevin Randle, respond, because he was military. He probably knows so much more about the World Situation Report, right, Doctor?
I spent a year flying helicopters in Vietnam. I spent a year as an intelligence officer in Iraq defending the country and the Constitution. Mm-hmm. But we're talking about something that has nothing to do with the political environment that we live in. We're all interested in that. We're all frightened by the way things are going there. But this is another aspect of the government suppressing information. What do they know about this, and what benefits could we reap by learning the truth about what has been going on out there? Do they have the information to prove the things we've talked about? By the way, I don't think the Travis Walton case has been a proven hoax, although there's hints that there is a hoax aspect to it. I've talked to Travis Walton. I've talked to Mike Rogers, who was on the crew. Yeah. I've talked to a couple of the other guys who were on the crew, so I know a little bit about what went on during that time. And in fact, I was talking to Mike Rogers, and he was talking about how they saw Travis get hit by the beam of light and knocked down, and they ran off and left him. And I told Mike Rogers, I thought that was a pretty chicken thing to do. Why didn't you go help your friend? And they did come back. They did come back, but he was gone at that point. But I kind of accused him of that sort of thing. So we've looked at all of that stuff very carefully.
Yeah, I know, and I just like you and I, we both know Travis, and hey, I respect him, the movie Fire in the Sky. But Andy, let me go back to you if you're still with us. I mean, more to the point. I mean, do you have any questions or concerns about that? Of course, we agree that there's a world situation report that we need to talk about, and what may be happening to America, another subject. But you get the final word there, Andy, if you're still with us.
That's what makes this show great, getting the final word for the caller. That's where you're great, Mr. Sky. Mr. Kevin Randle, thank you for everything you've done for this country. But I just want to emphasize this one thing. Inside America, we have governments. We see the chicken heads in the government. You think they could keep a secret what's in Roswell? Come on, it's nonsense. People would be in there with cameras taking pictures. There's no space aliens there. I just want to tell you in the audience, I get my information and my news from the National Enquirer, Mad Magazine, and Saturday Night Live. And you got that.
I get it. Well, Andy, thank you. I appreciate
his attitude.
I know. I appreciate Andy's commentary. But like I said, we want to try to stick more to the subject matter because why, Kevin and Dr. Randle? Time is limited for the subject matter we have. But let's continue on, folks. Let's go up to the Stephen King state of Maine. We say good morning to Frank. He's a regular caller. And good morning to you. I haven't talked to you in a long time. How you doing?
Dr. Sky, always a pleasure whenever I get a chance to speak to you. I know I've been busy with my son and doing other things, but
sure.
I'm glad you have Dr. Randle on. And my question or my comment is mostly about the Maury Island incident that happened in Washington State before Roswell. Now, what I noticed, and I did some investigation into that incident, is that the U.S. government proclaimed that as a hoax, but yet the two Air Force investigators were killed, quote unquote, when their plane crashed. My question is, every time this happens and something credible is about to come out or some type of investigation is about to happen, something else happens that supersedes it. And do you think, Dr. Randle and Dr. Sky, do you think that this is another example of a cover-up that will never be explained?
Good question.
The Maury Island incident.
There is a cover-up involved, but I've done a great deal of research into the Maury Island incident. I believe it's a hoax. I've covered it in depth in a couple of books that I've done about that, and the information that suggested it. The airplane was. The two pilots were killed. The two investigators were killed when their airplane caught on fire. I don't think there was anything unusual. It was just a regular aircraft accident. In fact, some of the people that were on the airplane bailed out before the plane crashed, killing the pilots. But that also involved Kenneth Arnold, who was investigating the Maury Island case for a magazine that I think it eventually evolved into Fate magazine in Chicago, Illinois. Ray Palmer was doing that. He was publishing science fiction magazines. I have to keep thinking about how to say this that will make sense to people, but he was publishing the science fiction magazine, and one of the guys that was involved in the Maury Island hoax had written to the science fiction magazine suggesting that he had been involved with the Inner Earth people, the Neros, which were the robots from the Middle Earth that was causing a lot of trouble in that. And there's a letter from him in one of the early science fiction magazines, The Shaver Mystery, I think it was. And then he becomes involved with the Maury Island hoax. And George Early had done some good work in that and published the information in UFO magazine about what he'd done. And I talked to George Early about that and looked at the documentation.
Interesting perspective.
I'm convinced that the Maury Island case is a hoax based on the research that I've done.
Frank, your response as we continue on here. Always appreciate the callers, and always, ladies and gentlemen, looking for new callers out there. Certainly we love the regular callers. But Frank, your final comment, if you're still with us, and I hope you are.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. I think that's fascinating that you think it's a hoax. It just baffles the mind that, if that much evidence is formulated, that something would come up and eventually become truth. I I think that that incident, along with Roswell, which I think is a real incident, by the way, and going all the way to Ronnie Zamora and going beyond that, I think that we should start looking at that type of evidence, and then back up a bit, and then see if we can ravel it all together, or put it all together, and see how this translates to today's UFO findings, and how the pilots are looking at these things and becoming
very interesting, real. Frank. And finally, from Frank, a final weather report from the state of Stephen King, as we call it. Is snow hit the ground yet, or not quite yet?
It is 33 degrees, and we are not experiencing snow yet, but midweek next week we should be hitting flakes up north, northern Maine, part of Canada.
Keep your eyes to the skies, Frank. I appreciate you as always, and everybody else out there. If we haven't gotten to you, ladies and gentlemen, we will. We have Alexi on the line, and we also have Eddie in Glen Ridge. We'll be getting to you folks and many others out there. You know, if you're listening to us far and wide across the nation and around the world, how about it, ladies and gentlemen? You've seen things in the sky. Here's an expert who can talk about these things, fact from fiction, and his opinion is valuable here. He's Dr. Kevin D. Randle, 1-800-848-9222. Doctor, interesting callers, don't you think? I mean, obviously we're out here to educate and open people's minds, on the simple mysteries, the not so simple, of the universe. What say you?
Well, I wanted to kind of add a little bit to what he had said. I did a book called 1973 that deals with the Lonnie Zamora case. Ben Moss and Tony D'Angelo had done a book about the Socorro landing as well. So there's a lot of good new information coming out of Socorro. So we in the UFO committee have done an awful lot of work in researching that. I think the Levelland sightings from November 2nd, 1957, Levelland being not that far from Lubbock, Texas, for those who want to orient it, where the cars were stalled and there was landing traces and things like that. I did a book cleverly called Levelland that deals with an in-depth research into those sightings. So we've looked at that stuff in depth, and there are no terrestrial explanations currently available that explain that. And if there's no terrestrial explanations, where do you go for the next step? You go to the extraterrestrial.
Absolutely, and I appreciate you, Doctor, because we're talking fact and fiction, and it's good to hear somebody, as we go to this break in just a moment here, about talking about what you might believe are traditionally hoaxes from your own investigative journalism and reports, and I find that very fascinating. Ladies and gentlemen, we're here, the Dr. Sky Experience, as you can hear us now, live across the nation and around the world, and also join us for our other show, this next show, and I want to thank owner and operator John Katsimatidis and the executive staff Chad Lopez for giving me this opportunity to sit here and speak about things that we necessarily don't talk about during the daylight hours, but we sure do during the midnight and the times we move into the darkness, the deeper part of the night. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, your questions and comments at 1-800-848-9222. We'll be right back. And we'll be rejoining Dr. Kevin Randle.
The Dr. Sky Experience on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Dr. Sky Experience.
Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Do not go gentle into that good night. Rage against the dying of the light. Portions of a poem that is, by the great Dylan Thomas. What does it mean? It talks about the fight for the survival of the species here on the planet Earth, where many people think that we might be extincted, but yet the resourcefulness of the Earth has overcome many extinctions. Not a duty to do things on the wrong side, but to look to the heavens for answers that might be out there. And our special guest, Dr. Kevin Randle, is providing information to these very important subjects. Fact from fiction, his research tells us, and we continue, ladies and gentlemen. At 48 minutes after the hour, let's say good morning to Eddie in Glen Ridge. You've been patient. You're on with Dr. Randle. How are you doing this morning?
Dr. Randle?
Go ahead, sir.
Hello?
Yes, go ahead, sir. You're on the air.
Oh, because I have the radio on and I don't hear.
Okay, you have to turn the radio down, obviously. Yes, if you turn it down, you can continue, Eddie, or also, unfortunately, we'll have to move forward. Go ahead, sir.
No, well, what surprises me is that we've been on this earth for such a short period of time. If there's other entities that have been here in this universe for millions of years, what makes it so surprising that they can observe us and think that we're insignificant? Mm-hmm. They're just seeing what we're doing, and they think what we're doing is doesn't bother them, so they have no reason to bother us.
Interesting observations. Doctor, this is an interesting conversation. Please continue.
My thought on that is that Carl Sagan had said once that we could expect one visitation from an alien race every 10,000 years, but he didn't delve when we started counting that 10,000. But even if it was 10,000 years ago, they would have seen the beginnings of our civilization and our rise as sentient beings, to the point where we're testing atomic weapons and we're shooting rockets into space. And while for millennia we were of no threat to anybody because there was no possibility we were going to be able to leave Earth, once we developed the atomic atomic bombs, and once we developed space flight, suddenly we may pose a threat to them, so they would be interested in watching what we were doing as a way of protecting themselves. The other thing to think about is that maybe they're observing us as we would observe of other ancient peoples, and see how their civilizations developed, and watching how their society develops, and so they're watching that with us. So, there's always that possibility that they're interested in us from a scientific point of view. The sightings from 1973, September, October, November of 1973, differed from most of the sighting waves that we've experienced, because the craft were seen on the ground and the occupants were seen outside grabbing samples. And I always thought, well, here's what we would have. What we would have done is we find these things, we land there, we gather all the samples we possibly can in a short period of time, then we go home to analyze them. And I've always thought that wave kind of suggested that to me. That
very interesting.
They could, and went home to. The graduate students are now writing their PhD dissertations on what was picked up in 1973.
Wow. Eddie, you're in Glenridge, you get the final word if you're still there, and hope you're following the show. Your last word, your last comment?
My last word is that I never thought that these more sophisticated societies were just observing us to see how we're developing, but they never considered us a threat.
Interesting. Thank you, Eddie. I hate to cut everybody short here. We're trying to get as many callers on with Dr. Kevin Randle. Thank you. Hope your morning is good. And we say good morning to Mark in Ohio. Mark, good morning. How are you doing? And thanks for your patience.
Hey, no problem. Thank you. You can hear me, right?
I sure can. You're on the air, sir.
Okay. I'm 64 years old now. I'm a business owner, whatever. But when I think I was 13 or 14, I think it was 1974, 1975. Near Steubenville, Ohio, Wintersville, Ohio, my dad and I were driving home from the golf course. We got done golfing. It was dark. We ate. We were on our way home. We saw a line of cars parked off the side of the road, and I was looking at them, and I said, Dad, everybody's looking up. Pull over, pull over. So he pulled over. We got out of the car, and up in the sky, I don't know how far up it was, but it was a round flying saucer, but it was it wasn't moving. It was just spinning. And we were looking at it, and I'm saying, Dad, do you think that's a UFO? He's like, nah, I don't know. I wouldn't say that, And I'm like,
sure.
What is it? So anyway, it hovered there for a little while, and then it started out going real slow, and then it went right gone. And it was a clear summer night, no clouds, no anything.
Yeah, and before the advent, Mark, of drones, there were the many drones that are now in the sky. You could maybe look at it that way, but who better to answer this, or at least give his opinion, is Dr. Randle. This is interesting what Mark in Ohio is bringing up.
I don't know how many times I've heard stories like this. and involving multiple witnesses, multiple independent witnesses. Of something extraordinary, and had an opportunity to take a good look at it, so they know it's not a star seen through the clouds or some kind of a mundane explanation for it. But I can tell you how many stories about that. There was a case from Oro Grande, New Mexico. A guy named Stokes was driving from White Sands to El Paso and came across a line of cars that were parked by the side of the road. His car was stalled by the close approach of the object, but they watched the object, the UFO, dive on them several times. There was 10 or 12 cars by the side of the road. So, I mean, another example of the exact same thing that he's talking about.
That's amazing, Mark. You get the last word here, as we always give our opportunity to the callers to have a conversation, though it may sound like we're doing a debate here and trying to do equal time, but we certainly appreciate our callers. Mark, your last comment on this particular conversation.
Sure. My last comment is that I believe that it was a UFO. I've told it to a few people when my dad was around, and he was like, I'm not going to say anything. But I was told that there were hundreds of calls to the sheriff department. I was told it landed in an area about 30 miles away in a field and then took off again. And the farmer there had an area where he was certain something happened, and then you didn't hear anything about it after that. But I'm sure of what I saw, and
absolutely, no doubt. No doubt.
Nothing like that's ever happened again, and I'm not a big UFO conspirator or anything like that. I'm just sure that I saw something that wasn't from us. So, but thank you for taking my call.
Mark, I hope we've tried to answer the question here. And again, this is why we have Dr. Kevin Randle, because we're trying to separate fact from fiction, and his extensive research helps us move the needle to which direction many of these sightings really are. We appreciate you. Hope you'll continue to be part of our Dr. Sky experience, Mark. Thank you. Well, it's interesting, isn't it, Dr. Randle, that, people out there, again, my story isn't that important, but it sure kind of shocked me, if you want to call it that, speaking at Roswell, the museum. And, I went to, I don't know how many people were in there. You've spoken there, I'm sure, maybe a couple of hundred people. And I was a little shocked that you wouldn't have more of an open mind, not you, but the people in the audience. I mean, it was almost like it was a religious experience to them if you dare counter anything that they're saying that they're seeing. Not that we're disagreeing with Mark or anybody else, but, that's what we're trying to do. Separate fact from fiction, educate, and I salute you in hour number one here. This is amazing.
Well, a story told by Frank Salisbury. He was a professor or a teacher in Utah who studied UFOs, and he was talking about an incident where he interviewed a woman who claimed that she had seen a UFO hovering close by, and through the windows of the craft she could see the aliens. And so the next day they went out to the site where she had made the sighting, and there the object was back. And he chased it down a little bit and found a group of teenage boys launching the dry cleaners bags with candles inside, creating little hot air balloons there. And so he had an explanation, and he went to her. And she said, well, that was what I'd seen. And then when he came back to her and said what he'd found, he said, no, that's not what I saw. So we've got to counter that part as well. People want to believe, well, I saw something really unusual, and if we offer an explanation, then we're the bad guys. But all we're trying to do is get to the best evidence possible.
Absolutely.
Eliminating the bad stuff and explaining the bad stuff. I don't know how many UFO sightings that were considered classics that we in the UFO community have exposed as being mundane objects, and yet the skeptical community thinks we're just credulous investigators believing everything.
And I'll say it this way, Doctor, filtering, and I don't like the word censorship, filtering fact from fiction, and yet hopefully keeping us open to what the government might be suppressing, so that we can get to the bottom of this thing, because as an astronomy background, and of course your extensive research, and so many people out there, we're not the only two important people in the world. If you look at the plethora of stars in the universe, if you look at the Drake equation, which talks about the probability, you know it better than I do, or equally, that the probability is numerically, there's probably star systems. Of course we know exoplanets, so why shouldn't there be something out there, maybe less primitive, maybe they're more advanced, maybe they are very primitive. We really, really don't know. But ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't gotten on the air, like our good friend Alexi in Queens, the following people: Robert in Philadelphia, Tony in New Jersey, Keith in New York. We promise in hour number 2, if you're still, willing to stay on the line, and we sure appreciate that patience. Dr. Kevin D. Randle, he's joining us in this hour and also in the second hour of the Dr. Sky Experience. Give us your website, because we got about a minute and a half before the top of the hour.
The blog is www.kevinrandle.blogspot.com. Go to Amazon and type my name into the search engine at the top there, and you'll come up with 38 books that I've written on UFOs, covering a plethora of topics. Some of them are somewhat skeptical, and some of them are proving that we've been visited. So it's
more on the Dr. Sky Experience with Dr. Kevin D. Randle. Stay tuned for hour number 2, ladies and gentlemen. 1-800-848-9222. Thank you for taking this journey through time and space on the mysteries of the universe that we talk about every week. Astronomy, space, aviation, weather, celebrity guests, and of course, stories of American exceptionalism. Much more in hour number 2.
The Dr. Sky Experience on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Dr. Sky Experience on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
At 6 minutes after the hour, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us as we move to hour number 2 of the Dr. Sky Experience. As you tell us, always great guests from the realms of astronomy, space, aviation, weather, celebrity guests, and stories of American exceptionalism. If you're on the line and holding to get into to have a conversation or with questions or comments to our special guest, Dr. Kevin D. Randle, we would do our very best to get you on the air with your conversational points. 1-800-848-9222 as we move into hour number 2. And a special thanks to our helmsmen, both Tony and Bill, as we navigate this, of course, Theater of the Mind Starship from the Powerhouse radio station, 77 WABC. Dr. Randle, thanks for joining us again. I'd like to go to the callers here and continue through that particular, environment so people can get their questions answered. Let's say good morning. He's been patient. Let's say good morning to Alexi in Queens. How you doing this morning, Alexi?
As well to you, Dr. Sky, and your guest. I hope everything is well. Now.
Yes, sir.
Good. This thing about aliens and UFOs and UAWs and this and that and encounters, I have this to say. The human race is not that old or mature yet. We are only around maybe civilized 6,000-7,000 years. Mm-hmm. And at one point in our development, we are craving more and more experiences. We are getting high, so to speak, on experience. Now, in the 1940s, Hollywood saw $1 billion profit potential in coming up with these movies about outer space as the world became more developed. So they produced tens of thousands of these movies going into the 50s and 60s with those idiotic movies of robots conquering Washington, D.C. and all this. And now to the present day. And you know what? With the exception of maybe two movies, the 27th Day and E.T. Mm-hmm. Those two movies. The other movies, the 99.5%, portray the aliens as belligerent, completely belligerent and bellicose. And
okay. What? I'm not laughing at you, Alexi. No. I mean, look, there are some great movies. We're not going to do movie reviews, but the point of the matter is, yes, there were a lot of silly movies, but somehow, I hate to say this, Dr. Randle, I kind of enjoy those old campy B movies because to me, they bring out possibilities. But Alexi, let me go over to Dr. Randle and give his opinion on this. I think we've got your message, Alexi.
The first thing I want to say is I thought the 27th day, the aliens were pretty belligerent in that. They were going to wipe out the human race. So I don't see that as peaceful aliens coming down to look at us. But there's been a lot of the movies where the aliens are benevolent. The Earth, the day the Earth stood still, the original 1950 version, as opposed to the Keanu Reeves version, is much better, but they wanted to wean us from our warlike ways so that we would become more peaceful and be able to expand our experiences on Earth. So we look at the Hollywood and what they're doing. It really has no relevance to what we're seeing in the UFO field. I mean, we can take a look at the westerns, and they go from the idea that the cowboys are the good guys to the other side of the coin where the Indians are the good guys, and it's just where Hollywood's head is at the time they're making the films. So I don't use that as a bellwether.
Lexi brought up some good points. I mean, there's good and bad movies in this. But
absolutely.
My hope, look, I'm not trying to bend the arm of the audience, and nor are you. We're just trying to, as I like it, fact from fiction. Your opinion, because you've done the extensive, exhaustive research on these particular subjects, is so important to the conversation. And we love critical thinking in dialogue. Hey, but if the whole world ran on that, we wouldn't have any problems, right, Dr. Randall?
and there's been some great movies that postulate alternative theories to the idea the aliens are from outer space. So we look at all that sort of thing, but we have to remember what we're looking at is a movie. It's not a documentary. It's not research. It's something that somebody has made up.
I agree.
And that doesn't make them bad movies. There's some very good movies. And I'm like you. I love those old 1950s science fiction, the Thing from Another World with James Arnett as the monster.
That is incredible. And the remake of it is actually very scary. But, Dr. Randall, this is something the listeners know that I do and proudly do it. We do a little Sky Update, which goes along with the thing of fact from fiction in the heavens. So here it is real quickly, ladies and gentlemen. I know many people like this. That's what they tell us in the emails. Folks, we're coming up on a new moon, which means no visibility of the moon, obviously. That happens October the 21st, 8:25 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time, which means the next few nights, if you go out to look at the beautiful firmament, the heavens, if you have clear skies, there'll be no moonlight to interfere. It sets it up, Dr. Randall, as you probably know. One of the better meteor showers of the year, the Orionids, will peak Monday night into Tuesday. Just look into the east, no matter where you're listening to this radio station, even, of course, you will have to have dark skies. And you'll see the Orionid meteor shower, all part and parcel from Halley's Comet, one of the most famous comets, folks. It's 76-year period. If you missed it in 1986, and you may not be around in 2061, hoping you would be, look and you'll see the debris. These are meteors that shoot across the sky. And 3 interesting comets, ladies and gentlemen, that I'm going to recommend you go to this website. And this is the best. It rocks, in my opinion. It's not affiliated with me, but people love it. theskylive.com. We have 3 comets that are moving in toward the sun. Comet Swan, Comet Lemon, which I tried to look at the other night and will do tomorrow. And you can too. And interstellar comet 3I Atlas, ladies and gentlemen, the one that's got all the story about it being maybe a spacecraft, a Bracewell probe. It reaches closest to the Earth December 19th at 167 million miles. No problem at all. And if you're looking for the next of the supermoons, get ready for November, because we find November 5th. The full beaver moon, that's a beautiful one. A supermoon is closer and brighter. And without getting too technical, they call it a perigee-syzygy moon, because of all the alignment of the Earth, the moon, and the sun, and that particular close period called perigee. How about that, Dr. Randall? That concludes this edition of our little Sky Update, ladies and gentlemen.
The only thing I would put in there, and it's not maybe relevant now, but Venus sometimes is very close to the Earth, and it can look like it's a huge object with searchlights beaming down from it. And I don't know how many times I've looked into sightings, and it turns out, it's Venus, and it's one of those stereoscopic types of explanations. Venus, but sometimes it really is Venus.
You're absolutely right. It goes in your books and mine as being a misidentified object. It's really the goddess of love and beauty, and she puts on a very distorted face at times. Let's say good morning to Robert in Philadelphia. He's a regular, and we appreciate him. And thanks for your patience, Robert. Good morning. How you doing?
Hi, Dr. Sky and Dr. Reynolds. Good to talk to you guys. One of the things I love about your show is that, as you know, I'm very political myself, and it's nice to get away from politics to talk about some other interests.
Absolutely. Right.
To the prior caller, but I mean, he did point out that he didn't think the federal government could keep something like this quiet. And I would just point out that you'd have to ignore hundreds of whistleblowers to think that they've been able to keep it quiet. And maybe in his sense, the conspiracy, if there is one, is working. But I don't know, man. It's the two collided. The government can't keep a secret, but these whistleblowers, we don't pay attention to them. But at any rate, I had a simple question, actually.
Go ahead.
the UAPs that they're seeing at Skinwalker Ranch, I mean, a lot of them. I'm wondering, is there any other entities or groups looking into those, mainly because I don't want to have to wait until the end of the season to find out what they are. But I was wondering if there are any other groups that are studying that to see what these UAPs that are going in and out of the Mesa are. Have you heard anything?
Go ahead.
I'm only aware of the research that had been done by the group sponsored by Robert Bigelow out of Nevada, who owned the Skinwalker Ranch for a while there, and I think he's now sold it to somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
But this is an area that really, frankly, hasn't interested me because it seems to be more paranormal as opposed to extraterrestrial, if you know what I'm saying. So I haven't really looked into that. The other thing I wanted to say quickly with the comment about the government can't keep a secret. Well, they haven't, because we're talking about all this stuff. So,
that's right. There you go.
That's kind of my response to these guys. Well, the government can't keep a secret. And they haven't. We're talking about this. We know about Roswell. We know about some of these other sightings. So they don't keep these secrets very well.
That's amazing. Robert, you get the last word on this particular episode for this call, so please continue if you'd like. Go ahead.
Just one maybe a side issue in that keep hearing things about, maybe they'll come back every 10,000. Dr. Scott, me and you have talked about this before, where the Earth goes in and out of the galactic plane every 13,000 years. And I'm wondering, because I think we're going to be seeing more things in the sky than we ever dreamed of since we've entered into that phase. And I'm assuming we're going to be in it for a few years, but I think we're going to see a lot more interstellar objects, and that's just going to make the whole conversation a lot more interesting.
Very well said, Robert.
I was looking at the idea of these interstellar objects that we've identified 3 possibly, but it's only our technology is reached a point where we can identify things and say these came from outside our solar system. So there may have been many, many other instances of natural objects coming through the solar system that we just couldn't identify. And we've launched 2 probes that some 80,000 years may be flying through somebody else's solar system, the Voyagers from the 1970s. So
that's amazing. Robert, if you're still with us, I just wanted to add this to what Dr. Randall was expressing and appreciate the comments from him. Back the discovery of that first, quote, interstellar object, the Oumuamua, a good friend of ours, Robert Wyrick, discovered this back in the Haleakala Observatory in Hawaii at Ubawi. And I had a lot of conversations with him, and the summation of what this thing supposedly was. The news media reported it somewhat incorrectly, but he did, the astronomer who observed it, said it had a very strange and unique shape to it. And many people, that's where it started with the Bracewell probe concept about something from an extraterrestrial civilization headed toward the Earth. But the strangest part, and I'll be brief here, folks, is that as it was receding from the sun, instead of it slowing down because of the lack of gravity from the sun, the push out, it was actually accelerating. So, Robert, that's the strangest one, and I know, Doctor, you know about this too, but who knows? Nobody really knew exactly what this was other than describing it as a ancient comet from another star system. Isn't that amazing, Robert?
And I think that we're going to be learning, no predictions, but I think that we're going to be learning a lot about our origins and our solar system within the next few years. And I'm looking forward to it, to be honest with you. And I'm looking forward to the work you're doing, Dr. Randall, and I'm going to keep my eyes to the sky, Dr. Sky.
Hey, there you
have
go.
A great night, all right?
Always love it. And hey, Robert, before you go, I know one day when we talk aviation, come on, my friend, we got to talk the F-15, right? There you go.
The first plane to gain speed while going straight up.
I love it.
All day long.
The time to climb airplane at a minute. It's called the Streak Eagle, as you probably know. And hey, we can jump into that one. I could spend a lot of time, and I certainly appreciate you, Robert. Let's say good morning to Keith in New York. You've been patient and waiting. And Tony in New Jersey, give us another call back. I'm sorry if we didn't get to you. But Keith, good morning. You're on with Dr. Randall. How you doing?
Good morning. Good morning. I'm doing well, thanks. I just wanted to share an experience that I had. It's approximately 5 years ago. I was traveling with a friend of mine who I was staying with her out. I don't think you're probably familiar with Ridge on Long Island, but we were driving back, and it was early morning. It was approximately 3 a.m., and just, before I tell the entire story, we were totally sober, not impaired in any way. and we were headed back to her condominium. And I noted to her, because I work in the microelectronics industry, that we were passing by Brookhaven National Laboratory. And then a few minutes later, I looked at the clock and I said, it's 3:16. We really need to get home. And just as I said that, the next thing I knew, the two of us were outside of her condominium, which is about 7 miles from BNL, Brookhaven. And I didn't have an explanation, and she was half awake, and we were parked in front of the condominium. And I asked her what had happened, and she said, I don't know. She said, when you remarked on the time, I saw a white, bright light ball hit the windshield. And she didn't remember anything after that, and nor do I. But we woke up and were confused, but safe, and made it 7 miles home
that's
from
amazing,
where we were.
Keith. Yeah, that's amazing. Wow. Who the heck knows what that was? Dr. Randall, what do you say on that? It wasn't
frightening.
So it was an experience that you had, no doubt about it. But, Dr. Randall, you hear stories like this all the time. Any insight on what this gentleman, Keith, might have seen or experienced?
Well, there's a number of stories where people have what we call missing time. And somebody will have a UFO sighting, and you're talking to them about what they've seen, and you suddenly realize there's a gap in the timeline there, and something else happened. Unfortunately, one of the only ways that they've been trying to get to that information is through hypnotic regression, and it's really a poor research technique. It's more of a therapeutic technique, but we've learned that stuff. The Pascagoula sighting, Hickson and Parker, they both were conscious throughout the entire experience. Calvin Parker had said early on that he passed out as the alien creatures came out to get them, and he told me that he'd said that because he just didn't want to get involved in all of the stuff that went on with it, and Hickson advised him, well, just tell him you passed out and you don't know anything, and Hickson kind of took the major role. Yes. But we see that kind of stuff all the time, and it's something that needs to be explored in depth, because if that has anything to do with extraterrestrials, we need to understand it much better than we do today.
Amazing. Keith, your final comment on this as we move forward? Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Sure. The only thing I would say is that when it comes to the hypnotic regression, the woman that I was with, she was hesitant to ever speak about it again. She said, I don't want to talk about it. And again, I didn't have any recollection of it. So something like that might be helpful for her. But again, it wasn't anything that I felt traumatic. It was curiosity. But she was definitely disturbed by the event.
Keith, thank you for your participation in the Dr. Sky Experience. Hope you have a good morning. You know what I'd love to do, Dr. Randall, is in the time that we have here before we go to this break in about 7 minutes, and then the last half hour, I'd like to talk in depth about your research with, of course, the story of Roswell. I find it so fascinating. You and I could talk with the audience for hours on this. Let's begin here before we go to that break at the bottom of the hour. The story of research is probably without me putting words in your mouth, the most extensive and exhaustive research is that particular incident. Is that correct? Am I fairly accurate?
With Don Schmitt, Tom Carey, we've spent an awful lot of time in Roswell. We spent an awful lot of time looking at the reports and the witness testimonies. One of the things, I met Don Schmitt at a science fiction convention, as a matter of fact. There was going to be a debate between science fiction writers and these guys coming up from the Center for UFO Studies. Well, I was with the science fiction writers, and I think one of them was actually George R.R. Martin, back before he became George R.R. Martin. And when the guys from CUFOS arrived, there was only one of them, and I said, well, that's not fair, and it's a debate, so I switched sides and went with the pro-UFO side at the time. And Don later called me and said they were going to reinvestigate the Roswell case, or look at the Roswell case, because there's a lot of stuff to be done, and they thought my military background would be of value to us. So Don and I go down to Roswell. We think we're going to solve the case in a couple of days and find out what really happened. As we're leaving Roswell, after we talked to Bill Brazel, one of the people who handled the debris, he was the son of the man that found it, we're going back to the airport in Albuquerque, and I said to Don, we've got to come back. We're not done yet. And it's kind of expanded from there as we got to talking to more people who were actually involved. The witnesses telling us what they'd seen. They're little pieces of the story, and the Colonel Blanchard's staff, he being the man in command of the Roswell Army Airfield at the time, his staff, his primary staff, every member of them that we were able to interview said it was extraterrestrial, with one exception. And so it became clear to us that there was something more to the story, and we were able to develop all kinds of leads. We've spent time traveling in a lot of different places of the United States to talk to witnesses, and eliminating some of the tales we're told because the people were plugging themselves into the Roswell case like they sometimes do. And the best example, I always talk about how at the turn of the last century there were 15 guys claiming to be the real Jesse James, going with various carnivals. And yes. I've always said, well, 14 of them have to be lying. And I'm pretty sure the 15th exactly. was too. But, people plug themselves into it. So it was trying to weed out the legitimate stories from those where people were just kind of looking for their 15 minutes of fame. But the upshot of that is Don and Tom and I have not come up with a terrestrial explanation. Every terrestrial explanation has been eliminated at this point that we know of, unless the government has some kind of secret project that would explain it. And I think if that was the case, they would have announced that in 1995 when the Air Force reinvestigated the Roswell case. And they
right, but the story was weather balloons. But let me ask you this specifically. Let's look at a map here so people understand this who never were there. I was not there. We talked there. This craft allegedly was not in downtown Roswell. Give us a description of where it supposedly came down from that area of Roswell, near or far?
Well, we're 65 miles northwest of Roswell on the ranch managed by Mac Brazel, owned by the Fosters. And according to Bill Brazel, he saw the gouge. It kind of came down. It was narrow at the one end. It widened toward the middle and then narrowed again, suggesting something had skipped, but it also covered an area of metallic debris. It left metallic debris behind. That's 65 miles from Roswell. We were talking to some of the counterintelligence people, Bill Rickett, for example, and he was talking about when he went out there, it was a short ride, less than an hour. Well, we're saying you can't get, in today's environment, you can't get to that place in less than 3 hours, given the way the roads are and all of that.
Exactly.
And that led us to the impact site where the actual craft and body were found, and it was much closer to Roswell, but it's still 45 minutes or 50 minutes from Roswell. So.
Right, and I'm glad you're clearing that up, Doctor, because some people, no, it's not their fault, of course, they may think that this happened right down by the Circle K downtown in Roswell, and it happened and everybody witnessed it. No, this was an event that happened, allegedly or factually, distance from Roswell, so that when this was obviously, allegedly they got the bodies, they have the craft. The whole story is just so amazing because it's mind-boggling. And I was kind of spooked out. I was there for a few days. We went to the little funeral home that they allege had the source of those little small caskets that were supposedly part of the story. And then we actually went to the 509th bomb wing, that hangar. And in the middle of the night with wind howling and the doors, banging back and forth, I'm saying to myself, this is bizarre. If this indeed happened, something unusual happened, to say the least, right? Totally amazing.
I remember taking a drive from Roswell out toward where the base was, and it's a long drive to get from downtown Roswell to the base, and it's dark outside. It's like 10 or 11 o'clock at night. I'm not sure what I was doing out there, but I was just suddenly overwhelmed by the idea. This was the path that Jesse Marcel took when he was bringing the debris to the Roswell Army Airfield at the time. It was just kind of a strange thing to be walking in that area at that time. Don Schmidt and I did a Netflix special for Unsolved Mysteries a year and a half ago, where we were walking through the hangar where the bodies were kept and talking about that. So it's kind of a interesting thing. We were there with, by the way, Colonel Richard Weaver, who did the Air Force report. And I said to the people working on the Unsolved Mystery, says, you want to talk to Colonel Richard Weaver? And they said, yeah, we'd love to have him. So I got Weaver in touch with them, and he showed up, so I had a chance to meet Colonel Weaver, which was kind of an interesting thing as well.
That's amazing, and the mystery continues, ladies and gentlemen. We, of course, go to the hard break at the bottom of the hour, as you know, in traditional radio and television, and we continue with Dr. Kevin Randle, 1-800-848-9222. Sandra in New Jersey and others on the line. You, of course, have an opportunity to express your opinion and your questions and comments here on the Dr. Sky Experience. We'll be right back.
The Dr. Sky Experience on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Dr. Sky Experience.
Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
From 1961 to 1965, Barney and I had not seen another UFO. Betty Hill, one of the most incredible encounters in history about alleged UFO abduction back in September of 1961. At 32 minutes after the hour, we continue with Dr. Kevin Randle talking about fact from fiction and his exhaustive research as not only a ufologist, but a science fiction writer also. Let's say good morning as we welcome all the callers here on this particular radio show, the Dr. Sky Experience. Sandra in New Jersey, you've been patient, and good morning to you. How are you?
Good morning, Dr. Sky. You know, all the guests you bring on the show are fabulous. And I wasn't sure how to tell you this, but one of you guests, it's not the one tonight, that's why I was hesitating to share it with you, but Norton Hauser, do you remember him?
I'm trying to think in my mind, ma'am. It's, yes, I do.
He's the one who you spoke about the radiation.
Oh, okay. Yes, I'm sorry. Norbert Hauser. Right. I'm sorry. Right. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So I have to tell you, he helped me a lot. I actually stopped using the EarPods on my phone.
Well, God bless. See, there's help. You're probably one of the first people to testify that one of our guests has actually helped in the follow-up on that. So we really appreciate that. Do you, let me ask your opinion. Do you have concerns about this whole subject, UFOs, and what's your take on that so I can get Kevin Randle involved in this?
Oh, my God, you're going to be disappointed. I don't even believe in them.
Okay, hey, that's why we have open forum. We have our First Amendment, right? Freedom of speech. There you go.
I mean, maybe there's stuff going on up there, but I just get so concerned about what's happening down here. I don't want to, I don't think about what's going on up there. Isn't that silly of me?
No, it's not, Sandra. Listen, we have to take care of ourselves. Right, Dr. Randle? We have to do our daily things to exist. And then, of course, when there's time, we study. There you go.
I have a question for you.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Scott, were you born in Brooklyn?
No, I was born in Jamaica, Queens, I was born in the same hospital. That's what my mother told me as President Donald John Trump. So there you go. I lived in.
There you go. Because I'm from Brooklyn.
My mother was from Flatbush. Yes. So
wow.
I'm DNA connected to you and everybody back there. You bet. And always shall be and always proud to be, and not to go overboard, but we lived in Rockaway Beach, and that was an interesting time.
Oh, wow.
And we went to Playland and hung out there, and I thought that was the best amusement park, better than Disneyland.
And you were you were track. You used to run on track. You were very successful in that, right?
I was very successful in that, but the honest truth is, Sandra, I don't want to sound like I'm on stage, but no, I appreciate your questions. It's more to talk about what the guests have to say, but God bless you.
That's okay. Well,
I'm glad that our good friend Norbert helped you not having to use the radiation from cell phones. God bless you.
That's right. Thank you so much. And I love your guest. I'm enjoying the conversation
I appreciate you. Blessings to you, Sandra. Let's say good morning to JR in the great state of Georgia. The devil went down to Georgia, but not necessarily JR. Good morning. You're on with Dr. Randle.
Correcto Mundo. Two things here. I know Dr. Stephen Greer, he's the one who spoke in Congress and everything about his UFO experiences. I had an opportunity to be with him at Bear Mountain. We had a UFO club back in the late 90s in Atlanta, and we had an experience that there were at least 12 unidentified objects that for 45 minutes they quite entertained our whole group. And then we had that experience where 5 of them broke away from the group and lined up over the valley that we were, the club was all up at, and signaled with our lights like on Close Encounter of the Third Kind. It was unbelievable. And Dr. Greer is still a phenomenal guy. I have heard many stories about him. And then participating in his UFO experience, I'm one that is one of the believers out there. And then another time, our club went down to Gulf Breeze. And I know that's a controversial subject, but we definitely saw that the description many times is that spacecraft or something. Anyways, I would have to say 5,000-10,000. It was up there, but you could actually see a orange and black oval the yin and yang kind of symbol going underneath this vehicle, and it was going. I couldn't judge the speed, but it went out.
Yeah, that's great, JR. But let me get Dr. Randall here to comment on these, because his exhaustive research and deep research may provide some insight into this. But we appreciate what you're saying there, JR. Go ahead there, Dr. Randall.
The problem with Gulf Breeze is the series of photographs taken by the one fella have pretty well been debunked. They're pretty well suggesting that it was a hoax. But there were an awful lot of sightings around Gulf Breeze at the same time that had nothing to do with the original person that were very good sightings. So you've got to kind of look at the whole package there. I mean, it's the same thing with Roswell. We've got an awful lot of very good information, but we've got an awful lot of information by people who are making up the stories. And like I said, it's the same thing with Gulf Breeze. Eliminate the photographs that we've all seen and look at the other sightings. There's some very interesting stuff that was going on in Gulf Breeze at the time.
Yes, that's interesting. But JR, I salute you for your, interest in this subject, because we don't have to bend your arm on this, and nor are we trying to have people believe something. Of course not. Everybody's entitled. But did you say to me, was it Stone Mountain that you said in Georgia, or did I hear you incorrectly?
It was up on the border.
Okay.
Bear. There's a state park up there, and I can't remember the town it was over, but we had gone to our club had a meeting, and then he said I forgot, it was maybe $100 or something. We went to a training class, so to speak, where everybody got into this mental telepathy program that he talked about, and we went up there, and everybody said, "Come as close as you can, and don't jeopardize your mission, and don't harm us or anything, but come as close as you can, and give us some sign to witness that we're communicating." And
well, JR, let me ask you a quick question, because it's phenomenal stuff. But let me ask you a question, because this is fascinating. When do you think, if ever in reality, we'll get disclosure on this stuff? I mean, we're all trying to get that. And what's your opinion as we close out with you on this comment?
I'm thinking they know our real intelligence and the spirit of the majority of people. And at that time, I think it's going to be they know that the majority of people know about this. But I think we're going to have to turn it over to God's hands, because He's going to let us know about the other people.
I appreciate you. I'm sorry we're getting interrupted by a magnificent solar flare or something like that. Just kidding. But, JR, thank you for your tenacity and interest in the subject with our special guest, Dr. Kevin Randall. Time continues, ladies and gentlemen. We move through time and space with Dan in Queens. Good morning, Dan. How you doing this morning?
Good morning. Hi, I'm doing fine. I was wondering if you think there's maybe an external force that prevents us from using more of our brains.
Interesting. Doctor?
I'm not really sure where we're going with this thing. I'm more of
our brains that we use is very limited.
Means that we can experience more? Is that what you're trying to drive at, Dan? In other words, if our minds were bigger, maybe we could perceive things that we don't already, and even in the UFO world, maybe connect with some other, force in the universe.
Something like that. We use less than 10% of our brains, right?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
No, that's incorrect. That's incorrect. I think the science is that we we basically use all our brains, but not all the brain is being used all the time. But this idea that we only use 10% of the brains has been debunked over the years. There was a movie called Lucy, for example, that came out not that long ago with Scarlett Johansson, where the idea was, which was an interesting idea. Well, she was using 10% of the brain. As she got brain boost, and as she got more of her brain involved, she was able to do all these incredible things, which would be nice. I think we can train our brains to do more things than we're doing, and a lot of times we think something's impossible, and if you think something's impossible, you don't even try to do it. But if you think something is possible, then you may find a way to access I guess different sensory perceptions is kind of what I'm thinking of there.
Dan, you get the last word. We got to move forward. We're limited time, but please continue.
Are there any exercises, and how about these commercial products, promoting brain health?
Well, I guess that's both out of our wheelhouse, right, Doctor? I mean, that's something that Each individual would probably have to consult a medical doctor on this, and I think we'll leave it at that. Dan in Queens, thanks again for participating in the Dr. Sky Experience. What I want to try to do, we got a break coming up here, Doctor, and I want to try to get your opinion on this and quick summation. I mean, this is kind of unfair to ask you this, but I got to because of time. What's your final analysis here on the whole Roswell situation? When we talk about, as you talk about, allegedly there are hoaxes, and in this particular case, give us your extensive research opinion on that one. I'd like to hear it.
We have, and I say we, Don Schmidt, Tom Carey, and I, for example, have eliminated all the terrestrial explanations that we can come up with. And the Air Force validated all of that, saying, yes, we looked at the same things and they were not the explanation. The Air Force settled on this idea that it was a top-secret Project Mogul balloon. And it turns out what was going on in New Mexico at the time was not top secret. There was nothing in the balloon arrays that would confuse anybody. So at this point, we have no terrestrial explanation for what fell at Roswell. Everybody agrees something fell, but we have no terrestrial explanation. I would like something a little bit more concrete than taking the next logical step. Well, if you have no terrestrial explanation, then you must look at the extraterrestrial. So yeah. I lean toward the extraterrestrial, and some of the people who were there at the time, like I said, Colonel Blanchard staffed, one of them told me that the idea that it was extraterrestrial was the right path to follow, for example. So I think that we're looking at the extraterrestrial, but I would like something really concrete. Here's a picture of the craft. Here's a government announcement that, yes, we have bodies of alien creatures and that sort of thing. We don't have that yet, but we're moving toward that arena.
No, it's amazing. I was close, and maybe you were, with Colonel Joe Kittinger, who obviously had his man-high balloon experience, one of the highest ever in the world. He was involved, and I talked to him about this, and every time I tried to ask him, he said that he was involved in the UFO situation in Roswell. And every time sitting in front of him, we'd go down to visit him in Florida, as often as we could. But every time I would ask him about it, he would change the subject and didn't want to talk about it. Are you at all familiar with him? I mean, that's an interesting man in history, too.
We looked into all of that when we were doing the research, because we were exploring every possible explanation. Mm-hmm. But they were doing that research, especially around Roswell, not until 1957. And the descriptions of the bodies we have do not fit the idea of a robust human person being involved in it. The creatures were much smaller, much thinner. And you look at the anthropomorphic dummies that they were using during that research as well, were 6 feet tall and very robust. They were very human-looking type things. So, that was one of the things the Air Force pointed to, that the talk of bodies may have been from these experiments that they were doing in New Mexico at the time, but they weren't doing them in 1947. They were doing
Interesting.
Later.
More with Dr. Kevin Randle. Sorry to cut everyone short. Still time to get in. 1-800-848-9222. And we'll continue with the good doctor on talking about some other incidents where there may have been close encounters of many kinds, sometimes referred to as the third. We'll be right back.
The Dr. Sky Experience on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Dr. Sky Experience.
Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
47 minutes after the hour, ladies and gentlemen, continuing with our special guest, Dr. Kevin Randle. Kevin, that's interesting. Both of us had some experience with Stanton Friedman. Describe this gentleman for the audience that may not know about him. I gather he was like an involved individual with Roswell like yourself at the great depth of research.
Well, Friedman didn't have a doctorate. He had a master's degree in physics, and he worked in industry for a while as a physicist. But he got interested in the UFOs, and that kind of became his life work. So he was very good on stage. He was very charismatic on stage and could make his points very well. He and I got into disagreements about some aspects of UFOs, for example, but we were always very cordial to one another. We were in Roswell to do during the festival, and we were all going out to dinner. The guest speakers and all that. And I began to sit down at one end of the table, and Stan was sitting down at the other end, and somebody made a comment about we being that far separated. So I went and sat down across from him. We always had cordial conversations. And it was the same thing with Philip Klass. You get him away from the UFO arena, and he was a very charming man to talk to, very knowledgeable man to talk to. You move into the UFOs, and he just would not hear it. He knew that there was no such thing as alien visitation, and ergo that anything suggested alien visitation had to be a hoax or a lie. And he operated from that arena. And Stan was at the other end of the spectrum. He embraced way too much stuff, I think, that he accepted too many things. But he was also very careful on some of his research.
Yeah, we spent a lot of time with, this gentleman that we're talking about here, Stanton Friedman, now correcting what you just told me, but a very fascinating man. I mean, I was sad we were at one of the UFO conventions in California, some kind of alien snowfest, and I walked up to him, and boy, I'll tell you, you just get him going, and he just keep giving you good information about this, and sadly he passed away. We were at the press club in Washington, D.C. during some hearings, and we were sitting together listening to some of the other people who were talking there, and we were a little bit disturbed about some of the things they said because they didn't really make a whole lot of sense, and we were kind of joking about that, between the two of us. So, like I said, getting away from the things where we disagreed, the relationship was quite cordial, but there were times when we clashed over different opinions on different witnesses and different aspects of the UFO field. Well, we sure appreciate your research, but in the short time we have, about 9 minutes to the top of the hour, I wanted you to give us fact from fiction and give us the best examples in your research, extensive research, about the incidents that you believe are really unexplainable in the sense that they lead more toward the extraterrestrial side other than the hoaxation side. Tell us.
Obviously Roswell, because there is no terrestrial explanation. Levelland is very important because of the number of witnesses, the interaction of the craft with the environment, stalling cars. Stalled a number of cars. It gets too close, and the electromagnetic effects is what they call it, would stall the cars. Once it left the field, the people could start their cars and drive off. The sheriff said that he had gotten hundreds of phone calls about this craft on November 2nd, 1957.
And where was that again, so the listeners understand?
Levelland, Texas, which is just west of Lubbock, Texas, and there were officers from Reese Air Force Base, which is in Lubbock, involved in this as well. There was landing traces left behind, so it's a very important case because of the number of witnesses and the different chains of evidence that we could look at. A very important case. Look at the Bentwaters case as well, which I've talked to any number of the people who are involved in it. It's a very important case, and it took place over 3 nights.
And where was that, Doctor? That
was in England. It's a Bentwaters. Rendlesham Forest was outside the Bentwaters military installation. I think it's on the east coast of England. So, but there was U.S. Air Force people involved in that. We've got a case from 1953 where an aircraft was sent up to intercept a UFO. The blips merged on radar, and they never separated, and the one blip left, and the aircraft has never been found. That was the Kinross case. Felix Moncla Jr. and guy named Wilson, his first name escapes me at the moment, were the pilots. They've never been seen before. No idea of what happened to the craft. I talked to people who were there at the time, and they were telling me that there were two schools of thought. One was that it was an aircraft accident, and the other school of thought was the UFO took the Air Force jet. So that's kind of an important case too. But there's lots of cases like that where there's multiple witnesses, there's multiple chains of evidence, and the government and the Air Force have worked very hard to conceal that, and take the discussion away from the facts of the sightings to the point where you're arguing about trivia, like I mentioned with the Levelland case, where they were arguing over the number of witnesses who saw the craft, which was not the important thing, but they were able to divert the attention. And there was the idea that the government when the government would offer a solution, that they were offering a legitimate solution. As we look back at that, that's simply not true. Project Blue Book, which was the Air Force investigation, they talked about there being only 7% of the cases they could couldn't explain. But if you go through the Project Blue Book files, you find that there were literally hundreds of cases labeled as insufficient data for scientific analysis, which is not an explanation. It's a way of keeping those cases out of the dreaded unidentified category. About half of the cases that they looked at were not adequately explained. And the same thing with the Condon report, the University of Colorado study in the 1960s. A good 30% of those cases were not explained.
Well, go back to October 11th, 1973, as you were talking about earlier in Hour 1. Charles Hickson and Calvin Parker, a new article out here, ladies and gentlemen, if you're a fan of the MUFON Journal, the Journal of MUFON, Mutual UFO Network. They have an article, entitled Pascagoula, the Ultimate Close UFO Encounter. What the basic synopsis is there, maybe you've read it, is that all these sightings around where shipbuilding, nuclear-type devices are either stored or built, in this case ships, Pascagoula, in the naval yards, that's a phenomenal thing. The story about what Captain Salas had seen when he allegedly saw these blue balls of light in Malmstrom Air Force Base shutting down nuclear, missiles, the Minuteman missiles and all that. So the connection to all this seems to be what? I'm not making this up. Your opinion's important. Around nuclear, anything to do with nuclear, there seems to be all these different sightings. How correct is that assessment?
When we've been asked about this, why were these sightings in New Mexico? And our response had always been, in the Roswell incident, the idea was the first atomic bomb was detonated in New Mexico.
Sure.
And where White Sands is launching missiles into space. Now, if I'm an alien race coming to look at Earth, the one thing I'm going to be interested in, we've got nuclear bombs now. We're blowing stuff up around the world. I would want to look at that, and if there's a place where they're launching missiles into the sky, I want to look at that as well. So the fact that there was a lot of sightings in New Mexico in 1947 makes perfect sense if you look at it from that point of view. What would be the biggest threat to an alien race? And that's our ability to get off Earth and out into space with atomic weapons. So, yeah, it makes perfect sense. Robert Hastings did a book, UFOs and Nukes, where he looked at that in depth. I've talked to Salas. I've talked to a number of other missileers, people who were in the missile silos and had similar events going on. At the time, that would be a national security incident, because if you could shut down the missiles from outside the missile fields, then our competitors in the world have a great advantage over us, because we can't retaliate. So when that happened at Malmstrom, as you said, in 1967, and there were good UFO sightings in what's Belt, Montana, which is close to Malmstrom Air Force Base.
Amazing. Now you see this, right? All the connection seems to be, if you dot the lines and just draw the lines from the dots, it seems to have something to do with nuclear. And that's still fascinating, because even with the Tic Tac situation with nuclear carrier, of course, Nimitz and a whole fleet of other very high-powered radars, USS Princeton, and even that, hopefully, if I can ask you kindly, if you'll come back in the future, and maybe we'll do round 2 of this whole conversation about what might be out there, fact versus fiction, and that's why we appreciate you, Doctor. And give out your website again, or how do people get in touch with you? I think that's so
it's www.kevinrandle.blogspot.com. Type in a different perspective, it'll show up. A lot of times, if you're looking at a specific UFO sighting, the Google algorithm will link to my site as well, so you can find it that way. The books are available on Amazon, of course, and I hate to correct you, but actually Goodreads says I've written 140 books. So
wow! So I stand corrected from inaccurate information that was fiction. No, I appreciate that.
But it's 38 of them deal with UFOs. A lot of them deal with the Vietnam War. I did a series called Vietnam Ground Zero, which is somewhat biographical at times. A lot of stuff that I observed while I was in Vietnam appear in the books. But they're fictional stories about a special forces team operating during the Vietnam War and things like that. Under the pen name Eric Helm, by the way.
Oh, wow. No, we salute your military service. That's another conversation for another time. And I've flown in one of those Hueys, not being the pilot. And the surprise that I got, Doctor, was when the pilot said to me, "We're now going to do an auto rotation." And I said, "What's that?" And he said, "Hang on." He says, "It's like putting the aircraft or the helicopter in neutral and the rotor blade just spun and spun and
well, we
soft
practiced auto rotations all the time in case the engine failed, and I had an engine failure at 2,000 feet, so I had to auto rotate. I couldn't recover from it if I'd made a mistake. Obviously, I put the aircraft on the ground in good shape. But
a beautiful helicopter, a beautiful story. Thank you, Dr. Kevin Randle, for your expertise. We continue with the Dr. Sky Experience. Ladies and gentlemen, join us again in about 24 hours or less as we continue Saturday midnight Eastern Daylight Time to 2 a.m. Sunday Eastern Daylight Time. And now we pass the torch of dialogue to T.J. McCormick for The Other Side of Midnight. And thanks to Tony and Bill, our helmsmen on our magical starship as we journey through time and space. Ladies and gentlemen, wishing you the best for a healthy weekend, a happy weekend, clear skies, and get out there and take a look at those meteor showers that we're talking about, the Orionids, Monday night into Tuesday, midnight, the sunrise from Orion, the constellation. We'll see you soon. Have a good morning.
Thanks for listening to the Dr. Sky Experience. You can hear the Dr. Sky Experience Saturday mornings, midnight to 2 a.m. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode so you never have to wonder,
what the heck is going on here?
If you're looking to create, grow, and sustain your wealth, download and subscribe to the Pain Points of Wealth podcast at BeBullish.com with Bob, Ryan, and Chris Payne. It's your podcast for market insights, money tips, and real talk on the economy.
Download and subscribe
at BeBullish.com.